What event in your life fucked you up mentally for the rest of your life? I came home one day. Mind you, my mother had been abusive to me my whole life. She had a Grundig stereo and was playing Irish music very loud. After I called out a few times pretty loudly. No one answered, so I picked up the needle which scratched the record, and she came out of her bedroom with my dad's gun and shot at me twice. I was 13 at the time and never went back home. You might win this thread. It wasn't even that long ago. My dad was always the idyllic standard of a strong person. At 6'5" and around 240 pounds, he was hard to miss. But he was kind, charitable, memorable, and often unflappable. Even after the 1 in a million cancer diagnosis, he continued to be the same old guy. In between hospital visits with mesh screens for MRIs and bouts of radiation, he never seemed to weaken. My parents had moved away from me and my hometown years before, so I didn't get to see Dad too often. The last time he came to my coast, I finally started to see the cracks forming. He couldn't walk very well and had bathroom issues. He was always way too free about telling me things like that. Classic Dad. The last time I saw him was back on his coast. I was able to have the joy of telling him that my now husband and I were engaged. But during that trip, I saw one of my heroes look truly weak. He insisted on trying to stand and walk as much as possible, despite his prognosis and weakened state. One day, several of us in the room helped him to stand, and he immediately fell backwards and said, "I'm dying." It truly broke my fucking heart, and still does to this day. Seeing someone you love and admire come to grips with mortality is almost indescribable. Dad's been gone for just over 3 years now, but that is a moment that I wish I could scrub from my mind. My whole childhood was an event that fucked me up mentally for the rest of my life. But when I was 8, my little brother hung himself with his long sleeve on our bunk bed, and I walked in while he was purple and limp with his eyes rolled back. I screamed, and my mom got him down barely in time. I remember the paramedics holding me and calling me an angel as I was shaking so bad and crying. That's the only day I have a clear picture of every single detail. Few years later, at 16, we got adopted by separate families, and he hung himself in his closet, and this time, no one saved him. That was 10 years ago, and every single day, I honestly feel a part of me is dead, and I never been the same since the first time. I can't look at ropes or people hanging in movies or people talking about stuff like that, or suffocation or anything related. Severe like PTSD from when I was 8, and the news at 16. I have so much anger, no one saved him, and so much anger, we were separated, and I couldn't save him again. When I was in grade 11, it was the last day of school before summer, and I had some extra time, so I went to the nearby mall with some friends. On the way back, I just stepped onto the sidewalk after crossing the street when I heard a blood-curdling scream right behind me. I turned to see a woman had been run over by a flatbed truck and was between the front and rear tires under the drive shaft. She was still alive and calling for help. Blood leaked out of her, and there was a visible tire tread mark over her mid-back, which was squished flat as a pancake. She quickly faded and stopped moving or calling out just before the paramedics arrived. It was around then that I realized had I been at that crosswalk 5 seconds later, I'd have been run over too. It was a surreal moment going back to school. I didn't know where else to go. I was in shock and just kind of wandered there as it was a block away. Everyone else is cheering for the end of the school year, and I'm just white as a ghost wandering around aimlessly in total shock. Probably had the 1,000-yard stare going too. I will say, it for sure made me pay great attention when I cross any road. It has saved my life from stupid or crazy drivers more than a few times, so I guess I thank that poor lady for that intuition, or instinct, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm pretty sure I have some PTSD over that event. I can see it very clearly in my mind when recalling this, right down to the wavy tread pattern on her back. I'll never forget that day. I'm not superstitious, but it was a Friday the 13th for whatever it's worth. I got shot in the leg when an active shooter stormed into King Soopers, and now I get paranoid whenever I go shopping. Heard the impact of someone falling to their death. Can never unhear that noise, and whenever I hear something similar, I jump slightly.